is part 4 of Paintings of Chivalry from the book Best Christian Art by me, Pete Rogers. And we're on part 4. First painting here is Greatest of All Heroes by Byam Shaw. And, chivalry is all based on Christ and, Christianity. And that's partly why it's so noble. And those were rough times. And to have noble knights was a good thing. And don't get me wrong, they didn't always follow all their chivalry behavior codes, but they certainly tried, and that was a good thing. Some things that sort of united Europe back in those days was a shared Latin language. Gradually, the dialects of the different individual countries started to break off from there. But, they all honored Christ, and there was an understandable way of living, and they were, it's the noblemen a lot were the knights, okay? Okay, here's a painting of Pilgrimage to Canterbury Cathedral, and this reminds me of, working in a Western hospital. In every Western hospital, every morning there's this river of fat, hypertensive diabetics that flow in. And the other thing I noticed is, you look at the average hospital. The average Western hospital is going to do something like, 50 to 100 ultrasounds every day, 100 to 150 CAT scans every day, about 50 to 100 MRIs. Tons of people coming in for colonoscopy. Well, colonoscopy you're actually potentially going to treat, but tons of blood tests. What I'm trying to say is regular X-rays, plain films. Everybody loves to go for an X-ray, but you don't cure a disease by taking a picture of it. I mean, sometimes you need to diagnose a disease, but what I'm trying to say is you cure a disease with all this low-fat, low-sodium, vegan stuff, lower your stress, get some exercise, get your sleep, get your sunshine, avoid toxins. That's what cures you. But how many people, for every person that goes for some type of imaging test or blood test, there's about 30,000 of them for every person that says, well, I'm going to learn about nutrition and eat a healthier diet, go low-fat vegan. So it's one of the things that's frustrating is most people, it's impossible to help them. They have zero chance of getting better, zero. You can't cure a dietary disease with a pill, okay, or with a surgery. You can temporize it a little bit, but not that much. Okay, here's the Coronation of Charlemagne. This one's by Raphael. So he's getting crowned by the Pope, like in 799 AD. And I got another painting of that. It's a little bit better. I love Raphael, though. Okay, here is Coronation of Charlemagne. Charles the Great is also called the father of Europe. And, this one, again, by the Pope. And Charlemagne, hired a guy named Alcuin who ran his schools. And they really improved the school system. And there's the trivium, the quadrivium, and all that stuff, the liberal arts. And they took the wisdom of Athens and added it to the wisdom of what had been learned in ancient Rome and had been learned from Christianity. And I like the way Christianity, especially Catholicism, is syncretic, meaning that it adds in knowledge from other cultures. So it always can keep improving. It's not fixed in time like a lot of cultures and religions are. It can keep learning. And, also, I want to have a good life. I'm not just worried about, going to heaven. It'd be nice to go to heaven later, but I want to have a good life on earth. And part of all this Christian stuff, love thy neighbor, be nice, give each other the benefit of the doubt, forgive each other. It helps everybody get along. I also like, How the Irish Saved Civilization by Thomas Cahill. It's a great book. And it explains how the Irish monks preserved the great books of the ancient Greeks and Romans. They were scribes and made copies of everything. And in a sense, too, that kind of reminds me of Dr. McDougall. Dr. McDougall is an Irish guy, and he, kept the history alive of nutrition. Because the low-fat, low-sodium, 100% vegan diet of whole foods, that's actually not that big of an audience or a knowledge base. All the other nonsense, moderate and high-fat stuff, that's got millions and millions and millions of views in comparison on the internet. So, if somebody doesn't teach the truth to the younger generation, it can perish from the earth and will descend back into barbarism. Okay, so I think T. Colin Campbell is Scottish or Irish. I'm not exactly sure. I think Jeff Nelson, the Veg Source guy, is Scottish. My father's Irish. So, Irish have been great for that. Irish are used to, and the Scottish too, they're kind of almost the same thing, Celtic origins, enslaved by the British. They're used to having, they know that experience of hundreds of years of being enslaved, okay? And it kind of makes you a little more awake and alert and aware of history when you know that that's a very real thing. So, anyways, yeah, I admire Charlemagne, and Alcuin kind of led to the Dominicans, led to uh, St. Thomas Aquinas, and the whole prelude to the Enlightenment. Subsequently Petrarch in the 1300s and everything. Okay, here's a nice painting of El Cid. This is El Cid right here, and he's holding the King Alfonso, to the task and making him swear on the Bible that he had nothing to do with the death of his brother Mark. This painting is by Marcos Giraldes de Acosta. The movie El Cid was great. It stars Charlton Heston as El Cid. Sophia Loren is his girlfriend. She's really good in that too. I give it 8 out of 10 stars. Beautiful scenery and pageantry. It takes you back to the age of chivalry, the jousting tournaments and whatnot. It's muy macho, but it's great. El Cid was a great hero of Spain. And I'm currently reading Don Quixote, and all of this stuff comes up, El Cid and all the other great knights like from Gaul and stuff. So it's great stuff, and chivalry did a lot of good for society. It encouraged people to behave in an honest, noble way, and yeah, of course they didn't always follow the rules that they were supposed to, but they certainly aspired to, and it led to good respect, good family structure. It led to a lot of good things. It also led to survival of Christian civilization because they had macho men who defended it rather than surrendered it or wanted to turn themselves into women or something. Okay, so now this is a great painting here called The Girl Eating Oysters by Jan Steen from 1658. And this reminds me of the good old days when I was in love with this girl, and man, life was like heaven. And it's great when you're young to be in love because your parents have to pay all the bills. You don't have to pay any bills. School's kind of a joke. All you got to do is time to, do your little schoolwork's easy and play sports, and then spend time being young and in love. You don't have to work, you don't have to pay bills. It was great. Gosh, I miss those days. Knowing what I know now, I would have flunked senior year of high school 3 times. Okay, here's a nice painting called Frozen River at Sunset in the Village by Eert van der Neer, 1655. And Christians routinely make art like this that celebrates the minor pleasures of life. Christianity inspires this. It all comes from the idea in the Bible that God is the creator. God created man in his own image. Therefore, man being created in God's image can also be a creator. And it also inspires you to do something that glorifies God, to do something that goes beyond your own immediate life. We're all sort of seen as part of this cosmic play, scene, conflict, if you will, on the side of good. And when you create good art, it's enjoyable. There's this idea of glorify God, glorify mankind in God's eyes. And Christianity just gets people to draw and paint and make songs and make beautiful music. And I think it does that more than any other culture by far. I think a lot of people that come from godless cultures, they're hardworking. A lot of them are smart. A lot of them are nice. But what I've seen is they tend to just primarily focus on themselves and their family. They don't have this idea of the glory of God, the glory of mankind, and creating something that'll last after they die. It's just not as big a focus for them. I see it. So most other non-Christian cultures, they don't produce much art, almost nothing. It's a dramatic difference. That's one of the things I love about Christianity, the aesthetic component of it. I don't care too much about the doctrines. I want to have a good life while I'm here on earth. Yeah, I hope I go to heaven and have a wonderful time there, but I want to have a good life here, and I think Christianity does that. It encourages everybody to be nice to each other, and if you're nice to the people around you, they're nice to the people around them. You get a ripple effect. Everybody's nicer. Society's better for everybody, and everybody's welcome. All you got to do is say, yeah, I like this stuff, and you enjoy it. You don't have to, there's no big barrier, okay? Hunters in the Snow, beautiful painting by Peter Bruegel, 1565. We all remember Long Walks Home in the Snow, and that really captures the mood, the feeling. Okay, here is another painting by Bruegel, Harvesters from 1565. And, I remember this when I was a kid and I was complaining about my schoolwork, having too much homework. And my father said, "You're so lucky. A lot of young guys have been sent to the front line. You get to sit around twirling a pencil." He said, ever since the beginning of time, 95% of people have been serfs or peasants and slaves or just, dead broke and just trying not to starve to death, scratch a little food out of the ground every day, working all day long. They were illiterate, didn't have a chance to get educated. You're lucky. So the old man was a good motivator. Okay, next painting here is Cimabue's painting of celebrated Madonna being carried through in a procession in the streets. And, this one's painted by Frederick Leighton. Frederick Leighton, just a great artist. So is Edmund Leighton. just magnificent. Okay, and Italy's got really great Christianity. Italy just has a sense of design. They're beautiful. Italians, you know, they do all kinds of things in a beautiful way. The way they dress, I like the way they talk. I like their language. All their paintings, magnificent. Their sculptures, magnificent. Italians really have good style. They're very nice too. So, anyways, beautiful painting. And that's it for part 4 of Chivalry. By the way, what page were we on? We're on page 309 if anybody's following in the book. So I hope that was enjoyable.